Hello, friends. Welcome back to 1D10T Does Stuff, and I am the 1D10T in charge, Trevor Stewart 1308. Hi, Just Me Crystal. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. And, it is our usual Tuesday stream, pardon me, where we will be discussing racism and sexism in the medical institutions in the United States of America. Mainly, we're getting context these days by reading books and trying to understand them. Oh my, I left some background sound on there. Let me do something about that. All right, there we go. Got rid of the background sound. Hey, Maddie. Good to see you. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we're getting context now still on racism and sexism in the institutions, in the medical institutions of the United States. And today we are reading some more from Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice by Rupa, Marya, and Raj Patel. And we will be discussing these things, discussing this book as we read. I have to wait a few more seconds before shout out. But let's start with today's ad read. Today's pre-rolls brought to you by the Hidden Leaf, downtown Charlottesville, Virginia, on the downtown mall above the brick, Suite 200. A great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds, eh, bud? And the only thing better than their bud is their customer service. And they have the lowest prices in town, according to my own personally highly biased research, by which I mean I was incredibly high when I did my biased research. Don't forget to check the website for times and events. The website is thehiddenleafcville.com. That's thehiddenleafcville.com. Where you can find events such as Frosty Fridays sales event, where you can find our other two sponsors, the Kush Gang, purveyor of fine edibles and drinkables, and Firehouse, where there's smoke, there's Firehouse. Oh, thank you, Just Me Crystal, for giving that shout out. And a note of disclaimer. This is a very political episode, very political show, and we will be talking about some very heavy topics. And the opinions you hear expressed herein belong to me, the channel, our parent company, and or the expressor of the opinion, not necessarily to any of our sponsors, such as Hidden Leaf, Kush Gang, and Firehouse. All right, there we go. That was the ad read. So, without further ado, let's dig into some depressing stuff. Hopefully everybody has something nice to drink, something pleasant to smoke, something to sort of keep the edge off, because this is some heavy and difficult stuff. Now, this book, Inflamed, is using the parallel between the world inside of our bodies, the biome, and the world outside of our bodies, our immediate environment, the exposome. And it's using this parallel to to talk about the some of the damages our bodies face, how damage to our body is dealt with, and is naming it, through the lens of inflammation, thusly the title of the book, but also naming colonialism as one of the main factors of inflammation in the environment, and drawing a direct link between our environment and our bodies, and how the exposome not only mirrors but interacts with the biome. Crystal, I love having you here. Thank you. You don't have to stay silent. We welcome anything you have to say. So yeah, we are in the chapter about the nervous system. And let's switch over to this so you guys can get a better look at this. We just finished a section called The Tree of Life, talking about how the nervous system is basically it has very tree-like aspects. Epiphenomenon. Let's just reread the last paragraph and get a running start, because I honestly only remember very little of this. Before I start, I do want to say, that I drink black coffee. I drink black instant coffee, specifically store brand black instant coffee. And I told somebody that relatively recently. And they looked at me and went, "Oh, you've been to jail." It's like, I mean, yeah. And yeah, that's why I like that coffee, but how'd you clock that? Black cheap coffee. When neurological systems are working well, you're able to engage in fluent conversation, to read, to name and recall, to ponder and image and explore and analyze. Colonial capitalism puts pressure on this system, straining these cognitive capacities, particularly in people who are denied the means for survival. Poverty is a cognitive burden. Working in poverty so that you and your family may eat every day takes a neurological toll. Poverty is associated with lower attention and lower working memory capacity. Rallying talk from the wealthy to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps rings particularly hollow when one's mental faculties are consumed by the demands of survival. Worse yet, the experience of surviving within the system of exploitation within colonial capitalism has been individualized. Government policy and medicine are often blind to the ways the nervous system is connected to the world. You are encouraged to develop resilience, a personal habit of being robust to the shocks of a system you cannot change. I, do think that we do this to ourselves and to our children, and it's been done to us, and we do this sort of rugged individualism training. I think it's a leftover survival instinct for a lot of us, for a lot of our families, from a time when we didn't have the ability to be individuals. You know, left over from the colonial era before America, essentially. It's something about it sounds like being stuck in survival mode for the poorest individuals. And because it benefits the richest individuals, they have no reason to change this. But also, I have nothing to back this thought up. This is just a thought. The erosion of neural, inflammaging. What? Inflammaging. I mean, they're gonna explain it, but what? The erosion of neural networks is seen in the inflammatory brain disease Alzheimer's dementia. Is it inflammatory? Is Alzheimer's dementia inflammation based? In dementia, the self becomes fragmented, not in a pattern of normal aging, but through the damage of neuroinflammation. The system starts to break down, and the loss of language is the first place it's often detected. So far, all of that seems true. Linguistic markers can predict the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's with remarkable accuracy. I hate hearing that because I lose words so much. Always have. Linguistic markers can predict the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's with remarkable accuracy. People forget the names of objects and of the people whom they have shared their whole lives with. A loss has profound consequences for the sense of self that is made through these sense connections. George Conley's family knew him as ornery and cantankerous. He had spent his life working blue-collar jobs in San Francisco, from sandblasting ships at Hunters Point shipyards in his youth to repairing cars as an auto mechanic for several decades. He hated going to doctors, calling them phonies, when they advised him to get yearly checkups or pursue preventative care measures like tracking his cholesterol level. Even as he aged and was suffering from various ailments, he interacted with the healthcare system as little as possible. At 80 years old, he lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco's Richmond district. He had been divorced for 40 years, but had two adult children who checked in on him. Often, when they came by, he would criticize their help. They didn't bring the right groceries. They arrived at the wrong time. They stayed either too briefly or too long. When George walked to the local corner store to get sundries, he would pause every block or so to catch his breath, taking in the foggy air. He had no friends, in spite of having lived in the same area since he was in his 20s. Adam Conley worried when his father didn't return his calls for 2 days. Sure enough, when he went to go check up on him, George was on the couch looking pale and running a fever. George was hospitalized for a urinary tract infection that had spread to his blood while he was being treated. His son stayed by his bedside. Adam noticed that George had been unusually withdrawn and quiet, but with antibiotics and fluids he perked right up. That was when he asked to speak privately to the care team. "Something's wrong with my dad," he confided. "He's usually really cranky and kind of unbearable, but over the past month or so he's become really considerate. He's asking me how I'm doing when I go visit him. He thanks me for things I bring over, which is totally not like him. Sometimes he seems to be confused as to where he is and when he's walking around his own place. He seems totally with it when I talk to him, but this is so out of character for him. Something's off." When the hospital team investigated, they found out that George's cognitive abilities were in fact quite compromised. In casual conversation, he chatted you up with stories of his youth, his old man charm giving you no reason to suspect that anything was wrong. But when you probed deeper, posing questions that required recollection, spatial analysis, or fixing new memories, he faltered. If you asked him what year it was, he'd confidently reply 1965, with a look like you were an idiot for asking in the first place. After referral to memory specialists and completion of diagnostic tests, it was clear that George had Alzheimer's dementia. This was the reason his personality had changed towards the end of his life. Personality change is not always, I've found, part of, or doesn't always come part and parcel with Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's dementia. It's not. I mean, it's a tell. It's a big tell, but it doesn't always happen. At least, I don't think it always happens. When the hospital team investigated, they found that George's cognitive dementia is a set of symptoms associated with memory deficits and problems in reasoning skills, is not a normal part of aging, and is caused by damage to cellular communication in the brain, which can lead to cognitive, emotional, and behavioral changes. I'm still not sold on that Alzheimer's is fully inflammation based, or is inflammation based. I could see how inflammation could be a part of it. Right. I don't know that we know. The nearest guess we have is that it's those plaques that settle on the brain. But the plaque that we thought it was is apparently not the plaque that it is. It might be a different plaque. So everything else they're saying about dementia is, as far as I know, relatively true. And Alzheimer's dementia is definitely very different from regular dementia and is a very different, is a very different form than aging, just regular aging, forgetfulness. I'm not sure that it's gonna matter that it's inflammation. Yeah, dementia can be caused by different things. I mean, I'm pretty sure that drugs don't help. I'm pretty sure the copious amounts of marijuana I smoke at least aren't supposed to help. On the other hand, it's like wearing ankle weights when you go walking. The fact that I force my brain to work so hard through the fog of the marijuana haze, maybe. Yeah, right. I can justify anything. I don't know if it's going to matter that Alzheimer's is inflammation, if Alzheimer's is inflammation based, for the point that they're going to make. It may not be that important. It also may be very important because we may come back to those, the IL-1 cytokines, the inflammation cytokines. So I'm so far there are other talk about the nervous system has seemed to be, pretty spot on. It's that if they're going to, I worry that the premise is shaky if they're going to base an argument on that. But we'll see what they do. They have worked on some shaky premises before, and they've also done a lot of work on very solid premises before. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. One of the most precious aspects of elderhood is sharing the hard-earned wisdom of lived experience with younger generations, often in stories of shocking audacity. Such stories tell younger people who they are and where they come from. Our elders are living historians, serving as vital links between the past, the present, and the future. With dementia, their wisdom is lost. There are many types of dementia, but Alzheimer's is overwhelmingly the most common. More than 35 million people worldwide suffer from it. Death can be expected just 3 to 9 years after diagnosis. Nearly 6 million people in the United States currently live with Alzheimer's, a number predicted to rise up to 16 million by 2050 due to growing elderly population. Between 2000 and 2018, deaths from heart disease decreased 7.8%, while deaths from Alzheimer's increased 146%. The main risk factor is age, but an extensive study of a 115-year-old woman shows that the disease is not necessarily the outcome of aging. The brain changes that accompany Alzheimer's are not inevitable. For decades, researchers have been trying to understand what causes Alzheimer's dementia. One characteristic finding in the brains of Alzheimer's patients is the buildup of two proteins. Here we go. Amyloid B tau and amyloid B is the main constituent of the plaques that are deposited in the brain and lead to cell death, vascular injury, and the clinical phenomenon of dementia. Tau protein makes neurofibrillary fibrillary tangles between nerve cells, and its amount is associated with the disease's severity. Where these plaques and tangles show up determines what parts of the brain and therefore the mind are impacted. It makes sense for scientists to conclude that preventing or reducing the buildup of these proteins would improve Alzheimer's symptoms. In fact, however, none of the drugs that target buildup have been prevented or even halted the progression of symptoms. Indeed, one trial showed that removing the proteins made the symptoms worse. Well, there we go. They've addressed the tau proteins that I was talking about. Or not the tau, the amyloid proteins. Researchers then asked more upstream questions about the disease, following clues from the past to understand why the plaques appeared in the first place. In over 1 million survivors of the 1918 flu pandemic, went on to develop Parkinson's disease, another form of dementia, which is characterized by the buildup of protein A synuclein. Yes, one does, because that was what I was just wondering. One has to wonder how the brain fog and dementia-like symptoms impacting many COVID survivors today portends, not pretends, an increased neurological issues in the future. Alzheimer's amyloid B and Parkinson's A synuclein levels both rise with infection, produced by the brain's innate immune response. They behave as antimicrobials, antimicrobials Antimicrobials. Cheese and crackers. Genetic analysis. Genetic analysis has tied almost all the genes involved in the development of Alzheimer's to the immune system. Its plaques are closely associated with a type of immune cell called microglial cells. Microglial. We've encountered in this book glial cells before, I believe. So now we're going to find out what microglial brain cells. Brain cells. Oh. Huh. Right on. What memory issues? I don't have memory issues. Alzheimer's amyloid B and Parkinson's A. Oh, I already read that. A specific type of brain cell. Glial cells in general are a specific type of brain cell, and then microglial are a specific type of glial. Man, you just... Okay. Okay. I was going to say, you just whipped that information out. Are you an expert or something there, Maddie? But you might just have a better memory than me. Microglial cells are immune cells residing in the brain, where they serve as mediators of inflammation, becoming activated in the face of infection, cell damage, or other stress. Ahaha. Yeah, I don't believe you, Crystal. I don't believe that you're a small brain at all. Glioblastoma is the brain tumor, the brain tumor type you don't want. Oh, okay. And so I could see how deconstructing that you'd get to glial cells or brain cells or cells in the brain. Okay. That tracks. An activated microglial cell is the nervous system equivalent of an activated macrophage in the body's periphery. In fact, microglial cells are derived from macrophages that migrate during embryonic development and take up permanent residence in the brain, where they differentiate into their mature form. As the brain's macrophages, they are in charge of immune defense and the maintenance of homeostasis. Rudolf Virchow offered us the first images of activated microglial cells more than 150 years ago in his seminal work, Cellular Pathology. He understood them as cells in the brain that aren't nerve cells, but rather some sort of filler in the space between neurons. Microglial cells are not just passive filler. They are in fact participant cells to they are parent cells to neurons existing. They're like parent cells to neurons existing in two different states. One is supportive and works to keep the area around neurons clean. In this housekeeping role, they help repair tissue, to secrete growth factor, and to phagositose infectious elements. Phagocytose infectious elements, dead neurons and other debris, even amyloid B. The other state is pro-inflammatory. They secrete cytokines and free radicals such as the reactive oxygen specific species, such as reactive oxygen species and IL-1B, which can injure nearby nerve cells. Astrocytes are another brain cell closely related to microglial cells. They also regulate neuroinflammation. Chronic stress can invoke ascension-associated secretory phenotype in astrocytes, making them a source of localized inflammation in the brain. I'm aware that those were words, but what? I mean, I think I understand what they mean, but also, what? I okay, these astrocytes are inflammation. Yeah, like the phenotype is what I'm, but I think it's what that is saying is that it's basically saying stress causes a certain type of astrocyte to be secreted that causes inflammation, causes extra inflammation. Sentience associated. I really yeah. Yeah, I really do. I mean, I think I know what they mean, kind of. Like, chronic stress will cause inflammation in certain areas through whatever that mechanism is. As with macrophages in wound healing, balance is key. Normally, pro inflammatory activity is self limited, turning off once homeostasis is achieved. Sustained activation means an inflammatory stimulus is chronic or the response simply fails to stop. Right. When it continues unabated, it produces the inflammation that is a hallmark of neurodivergent conditions such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, multiple sclerosis, and am- amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Oh, ALS. I should have had that. I should have been on that. Like, understanding what flips a microglial cell from housekeeping state to the inflammatory state and keeps it there will be key to further characterizing the pathosociology of these diseases. What is no longer in question in the face of abundant evidence is that the inflammation drives the network breakdown we see in these neurodegenerative diseases. Pathosociology. Consider two experiments with rats and mice. In a laboratory, researchers repeatedly introduced young male rats into cages with older, larger, aggressor rats. After a few confrontations, the younger rats, socially defeated, were loaded with stress signals. Their immune systems changed. Stress primed their monocytes, the precursors to macrophages, to throw off more pro-inflammatory signals than before they were socially defeated. Under stress, monocytes travel across the blood-brain barrier, where they can directly impact the brain. In a second experiment, mice were given an electrical shock to the foot. Others close to them had higher levels of inflammation primed cells in their brains. Pain and social defeat, ours and that of others, brings inflammation to the brain. That's interesting. Here it becomes startlingly clear how our nervous system is connected to the immune system and how these systems are connected to our experience of the world, to the systems that cause suffering to others. Our reaction to others' pain can inflame our brains. Our consciousness is a tool through which we can understand others, to sympathize and be moved to care. When the violent ordering of colonial capitalism makes some people suffer, we all do. I like that. All right. Buckle in. This next one starts rough. Justice is the medicine. On December 2nd, 2015, San Francisco Police Department officers killed 26-year-old Marya Woods in the predominantly black neighborhood of Bayview, and no cops were held accountable for the murder. His family and other community members fighting for justice asked the doctors of the Do No Harm Coalition to design a research study to answer a critical question. If a police killing is a wound and the justice is medicine, what happens to our community's health if the medicine is withheld? The findings are obvious. When police murder with impunity, everyone suffers. Preliminary results indicated that killings created widespread PTSD, and the lack of justice compounds this effect. As we have seen, trauma and PTSD are potent activators of inflammation. Erica Garner died of a heart attack at the age of 27, just 3 years after police killed her family. Erica Garner showing the toll this violence takes by way of inflammation. A police killing creates concentric circles of death in its wake and erodes a community's health from the inside out. That trauma caused by police killings had to be documented by a research study in order to influence policy is another example of how black testimony doesn't matter. The stories of suffering and violent video recordings should say enough. But one striking takeaway from the Justice Study's findings is this. While black and brown community members are most impacted by the trauma, white people suffer too. Our consciousness has evolved to recognize the suffering of other beings, even if we are taught over a lifetime to depersonalize the web of life and other people. We have evolved over millennia to care about suffering because we have evolved as social animals. When injustice to one person happens, all who witness it carry the allostatic load. I have a feeling I'm just going to be highlighting this entire section. I got my headphone cord caught under something. There we go. That should free it up. There we go. The Justice Study from the Do No Harm Coalition also found that this load is not distributed equally. As BIPOC carry the heaviest burden, Justice Study from the Do No Harm Coalition also found that this load is not distributed equally as BIPOC carry the heaviest burden. Stress ages the brain in ways that lead to cognitive decline. The impact is dose dependent. The more stressful events you experience, the greater your degree of mental impairment will be, which is why it's important to remember that lifetimes of stress add up differently for different communities. A stressful event can cause changes in the brain that create a permanent cognitive impairment by literally changing the architecture of neurons and the density of connectivity. A tragedy like losing a child can result in lower scores in tests of memory and executive function. In white people, that cognitive loss is equivalent to a year of aging. For black people in the United States, the same stressful event led to the equivalent of aging 4 years. Black people report up to 84% more mean life stressful events than white folks. Mean as in mean versus median, not mean as in mean versus nice. Cumulative lifetime stress accelerates the aging of the brain, and the rate of acceleration is directly proportional to how damaging the exposome is. As we have seen, racism is a cognitive load that is experienced throughout the body. It provokes a cascading series of responses. Just like what you experience during flight or flight. Your heartbeat will rise, your breath will quicken, and you'll start to sweat. When you are under stress, your body's sympathetic nervous system will ready you for action. As a result of this involuntary nervous system activity, the electrical resistance across your skin drops. This used to be called the electrogalvanic response, but now it's known as electrodermal response. It can be measured with some simple electronics. These are also the responses that polygraphs or lie detectors look for to determine whether you're lying. Your body tells the truth through its autonomic actions. A recent study measured the racism black and Latinx students experience on a majority white Midwestern U.S. university campus. Jesus, that's hard to say. Let's try that again. A majority white Midwestern U.S. university campus. The researchers provided the students with a wearable device to track skin conductivity, and a journal in which they were to reflect on their experiences with racism in 3-hour blocks. This method made it possible in real time to see the intensity of the allostatic load borne by people of color in a white supremacist society. Carried out under the Donald Trump presidency, a time of increasing hate crimes and racist stigmatization of immigrants, when 70% of black and 50% of Latinx students reported racism on campus, the burden was unmistakable. I don't think they thought Trump would win again. I think they thought we were only going to get one Trump presidency. Over a lifetime, the allostatic load of race and class creates a disproportionately toxic exposome for the brain. Chronic stress and allostatic load affect the whole brain and cause atrophy of neurons in specific regions responsible for behavior and cognitive function: the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. And this all plays out in the dramatic racial disparities of who will suffer from Alzheimer's. In the United States, 65-year-old black person faces 38% likelihood of developing Alzheimer's in the next 35 years. For Native Americans, the risk is 35% and 32% for Latinx, 25% for Pacific Islanders, 30% for whites, 28% for Asian Americans. It's clear that black people suffer disproportionately from Alzheimer's. Social support systems and income offer some buffer to stress effects on the brain, but simply put, injustice ages us and makes us more prone to cognitive decline. That inequality is the result of social choices, segregation, domination, and supremacy made by the few to change the cognitive outcomes experienced by the people of color. Those choices must be undone. Yeah, I feel like that whole section was pretty important. There's a lot in that section that puts words to what some of what I'm trying to say. A lot of what I'm trying to say. And yeah, it was a very helpful section. The mind outside your brain. We've been going for about an hour. Um, I'm really curious about this the mind outside your brain section. Um, I think we have time to do that. I think we have time to do that. Yeah. I think I'm gonna take a quick break, real quick. A quick break, real quick. And I will be back in a few minutes, and we will tackle the mind outside your brain. Back momentarily. All right, friends, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with me for that little break. Um, we're gonna go ahead and dive right back in. This last section, the mind outside your brain, will be the last section we read today. Yeah. There we go. All systems within the body are connected to the systems outside. Social and ecological stressors cause depression and cognitive decline through inflammation, not just in the brain. Inflammation in other bodily systems, circulatory, digestive, endocrine, and so on. Also for demographics and cardiovascular risk. Also affect our consciousness and mental states. One study finds after adjusting for demographics and cardiovascular risk factors associated with inflammation, found that people in their 40s and 50s with higher markers of systemic inflammation were more likely to have greater mental impairment over the following 20 years. Systemic inflammation also worsens the progression of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's patients. One means by which systemic inflammation is translated into brain inflammation is pro-inflammatory cytokine, tumor necrosis factor A, TNFA. Once it is in the central nervous system, TNFA activates microglial cells along the inflammatory pathway that causes and exacerbates neurodegeneration. There is still much to untangle in the complex mechanics of inflammation, but current research is dramatically changing our understanding of the very nature of the mind-body relationship. For decades, the brain was viewed as a site that does not develop the same kind of inflammatory response as other parts of the body. It was thought to have immune privilege. That view suggests a kind of upstairs downstairs dynamic in which the brain is somehow cordoned off from the body's other organs, not deigning to interact with whatever lowly processes are happening below. Recent discoveries, however, contradict this understanding. In fact, the brain is directly tied to and influenced by those processes, and nothing better demonstrates this fact than the gut microbiome. Do we really have to revisit the gut microbiome? That was my least favorite section of the book. What we know about the importance of the forest living inside us gives us a glimpse of how robust the Let me try that again. What we know about the importance of the forest living inside us gives us a glimpse of how a robust gut microbiome is vital to modulating the brain's functions. For example, some people who receive successful fecal transplants to counter Clostridium difficile infection, the hard-to-treat bacterium that can cause life-threatening illness when out of balance in the colon, enjoy not only the relief of their gastrointestinal symptoms, but also improved mental health. Why'd we have to talk about it? Why? Through blood and microcircuits and the microcircuits of neural connections, the brain and digestive system are entwined in what is called the gut-brain microbiota axis. The science of gut-brain connections is very strong, but what we are learning is already remarkable. The gut produces up to 90% of the body's serotonin, controlled by signals coming from our microbes. Serotonin, as we saw in Chapter 7, is a hormone and neurotransmitter that creates a sense of well-being, derived from the essential amino acid tryptophan. Like melatonin, for which it serves as a precursor, serotonin is ubiquitous in the animal and plant kingdom. The pathway for making serotonin is the same in humans as it ever was, back when cyanobacteria were floating in the primordial oceans, changing Earth's atmosphere to one oxygen molecule at a time. When plant life evolved from single-cell organisms to multicellular complexity, levels of serotonin inside them rose dramatically. Tryptophan is the molecule in plants responsible for harnessing the energy of the sun, and serotonin was beneficial to minimizing UV damage in the face of this energizing event. In humans, sunlight also plays a role in serotonin levels. Seasonal depression in winter months is caused by low serotonin levels and can be treated with light therapy. When we don't have enough of this hormone, we are prone to depression and other stress-related states, including, at the most extreme, suicidal ideation. Traditionally, researchers studied the development of the nervous system by focusing on the brain, but over the past few decades it has become clear that signals from outside the brain are central to this process. Not only is the gut the largest portal between the inside of the body and the world around us, but molecules in our food can directly affect how the brain develops. Recently, a burst of research has demonstrated that gut microbes communicate with the nervous system in a dialogue crucial for healthy development, behavior, and immune response. Disruptions in that communication are implicated in depression, anxiety, cognitive problems, and autism. Careful where you go around autism, man. That's... During the gestation and the early months of infancy, gut microbes are involved in signaling the shapes that the growing nervous system. During gestation and the early months of infancy, gut microbes are involved in signaling that shapes the growing nervous system. They play a role in the development of the blood-brain barrier, the uniquely selective lining of blood vessels that tightly regulates the movement of molecules, ions, and cells into and out of the brain. This barrier is critical to homeostasis and keeps the brain safe when the body is exposed to a toxin or experiences wild fluctuations in ions such as sodium. This may be one of the pathways through which the exposures or lack of them in youth come to make such a difference in bodies across different social gaps as we age. Gut microbes are also crucial in melatonin, the coating of neurons' long fibers with insulation that acts like a covering on electric wire. Myelination. Yeah. Myelination. Without these microbes, nerve signals don't reach their destination, and this microbial caretaking may be continuous. A study of autoimmune encephalitis encephalomyelitis, in which the brain and myelin are inflamed, found that polysaccharide A, produced by the gut bacteria Bacteroides fragilis, travels to the brain and protects the central nervous system from demyelination and inflammation. Moreover, gut microbes play a critical role in the maturation of microglial cells, which are so central to our discussion of neurodigestive diseases and inflammation. I think I understood all of that. Throughout our lives, the gut microbiome shapes and influences the brain and therefore the mind. The feces of people with Alzheimer's dementia contains less microbial biodiversity than those of age-matched, sex-matched elders with no dementia. Our gut microbiome changes as we age, which may make us more prone to developing cognitive difficulties. After young mice were transfused with feces from old mice with spatial reasoning issues, their microbiomes shifted to match those of the older mice, and they too began to display spatial reasoning issues. It's as if cognitive skills, or lack thereof, somehow transplanted by way of the feces. One has to wonder what would happen if the experiment were reversed. Would the old mice gain spatial functioning? Why do we have to keep talking about this? Is this the only mechanism or example that we have? Just, just, just why? Man, what? Why? Gut dysbiosis is associated with several kinds of mental illness. There we go. Gut dysbiosis is associated with several kinds of mental illness. Depression and anxiety are often explained either as personal failures or as hardwired into the brain, but evidence now shows that social stress, particularly poverty, has inflammatory effects that change our gut, which in turn can reduce microbial diversity and lead to changes in the brain. Your depression and anxiety may be less an intrinsic part of your character than a consequence of experiencing intersecting forces of colonial capitalism. They may be what it feels like to be embedded in the converging systems of our biology and our exposome. The allostatic load of oppression lived through and recorded within our body reshapes our minds. While all these associations are pointing towards underlying causation, and while large gaps in our understanding remain, the challenge that such discoveries pose to assumptions of mind-body dualism and even to the very concept of self is striking. The idea that the presence or absence of organisms in our gut can directly affect the development and functioning of our brain is expanding the limits of our imagination. Instead of focusing simply on plaques and tangles, for instance, doctors who study neurodegenerative diseases are now looking at the whole body and how systemic and localized inflammation accelerates it. Path-breaking research into the role of tending the other microbes in taking care of ourselves has fundamentally changed our understanding of health and well-being. These examples of how our health is an effect of systems within systems show how ineffective reductionist frameworks are for understanding the causes of many inflammatory diseases that are making us sick. Despite these strides in our comprehension, humans continue to treat one another and the web of life as disposable. They continue to treat the mind as separate from both the body and the natural world. The colonial cosmology of infinite growth, infinite greed, and a planet that can infinitely absorb our follies is becoming increasingly hard to sustain. The violence needed to enforce the delusion causes widespread trauma and the deaths of the people and the world we love. Yet, even as we mourn, we can find hope. Our collective rituals of grief can knit us together. Like the oscillating intelligence of the Pando forest, its tens of thousands of trees united under the soil as one being, a multiplicity that itself is overwritten by the memory of the killings in Bolivia. Wow, that feels like that was a wrap up spot. And we've been going for about an hour and a half now. Um, the video it'll be a little under because cut out some time in the beginning and all. Um, it was an interesting look at the nervous system and how the nervous system interacts with the body and the world outside of it. It really is, they of course had to touch on that thing that I hate talking about. Man, do I not like talking about that? Like, dang it. But that's, I do see how the two are very strongly connected. And obviously, we can see how the systemic colonial capitalism has had an extreme effect on both the nervous system and the gut microbiome. So yeah, that was our episode for today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Jessamy Crystal. Much love to all you lurkers out there. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I know it's Tuesday streams are a depressing stream, so but we are. I do feel like we are building up the context and the vocabulary for making the statement that we're going to eventually come to. Yeah. Hopefully, I don't even know. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm doing the task before me and trying to connect it to the larger world around me, but I don't know. I don't know what I expect other people to take away from this. I know why I started doing this, and I don't feel like those circumstances have changed. But I don't know what I hope that other people will get out of this. I just hope that other people will get something out of this. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining me. Stick around for the raid, and now is the time on the show when I say, as they say around here, 2 up, 2 down. VA, double deuces. I'm out, y'all.